Whiskey for beginners. And I'm not quite a beginner at recording, but it's a thoroughly amateur production, all right. I am a thorough amateur at recording things. I am looking at my phone right now. And I don't know where I was going. What I was saying just slipped out of my head right in the middle of saying it. So, tonight, I was going to do a review, but I realized this is only my second glass from this bottle. And so I'm not going to do a review. I've changed my mind to setting here. This is going to be Sippin' and Talkin', which is what I'm mostly recording these days. As for what I'm going to sip, well, it's got my writing all over it. So maybe, I don't know if you can see the back of it. It doesn't seem to show through real good there. But this is Angel's Envy Bourbon. Maybe you can read that. It doesn't look like it's focusing too well on the strip here. But it is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey finished in port wine barrels. Thank you, Angel's Envy, for saying barrels. Everybody says casks. Yeah. Over in Europe, a cask and a hogshead and a barrel, and I think there's another term, a butt, B-U-T-T. Those have specific meanings. Here in the States, if you want to be pretentious, you just say, it's aging in a cask. I'm an American. I'm a Southern American. I'm a Texan American. I'm a Texan. Just leave it at that. I speak Texas English. You put your whiskey in a barrel. Anyway, Angel's Envy. I don't know if it's the first finished whiskey. I have the idea in my head that it has at least made that claim. And a finished whiskey is where once it's aged to whatever point, you take it out of that original barrel and put it in some other barrel. In this case, a barrel which was used, or which they used. I hate the passive voice, and I still sometimes find myself falling into it. You take it out of the original barrel, put it in a new barrel, in this case one that they used to age port wine in. And port has that name because originally it came from the area around a town in Portugal named Oporto. And the English shortened it to port. We Americans sometimes alter things too. There's a Spanish surname, Gutierrez. I've heard people call it Gutierrez. There's a Jesus, which is the Spanish word for Jesus. And people call it Jesus. And I'm still dealing with allergies. I'm not posting videos in the same order that I record them. But as I'm sitting here on Monday night at, well, it's officially Tuesday morning. It's 12:33. I've gone from a raw throat from drainage on Saturday to being so stuffed up that I had a sinus headache on Sunday to having a scratchy throat and a cough and sneezes on Monday. Who knows how Tuesday will come out. But anyway, the first Angel's Envy I had was way back in 2021 when I was just starting to drink whiskey. A guy on MeWe sent me 4 samples, one of which was Angel's Envy. And I didn't care for it. I really couldn't say why back then. I hadn't developed my palate, nor had I learned how to understand and describe whiskey. So I thought, my palate has changed. I've learned, my opinion of various whiskeys has changed. When I first tried Knob Creek bourbon, I didn't much care for it. months later, I tried it again, and now it's one of my favorites. So I thought I'd try some Angel's Envy again. I got myself a pint bottle, and the first glass, which I had 3-4 days ago, I guess, I didn't care for. I was able to explain why I didn't care for it. So I have made progress. And this was up next in the rotation. And so I'm going to pour it and sip it, talk to you about it, maybe talk to you about something else. This is Sippin' and Talkin'. I must admit it is a pretty bottle, and it's an easy bottle to hold. Now granted, this is a pint. A fifth would be bigger, but it's narrow this way so you can grab a hold. It's narrow at the base, narrower at the base, so it's not going to slide down easily. And it's a pretty design. And you probably still can't see the angel that's on the back, especially with my writing on it. But this pint, I got it on the 15th, so today I'm just going to consider it still Monday is the 21st, so it's been 6 days since my first taste of it. A pint cost me $30.09. And my standard of value in whiskey is this. Is the whiskey in the bottle worth to me what I have to pay for it? And I understand that scarcity drives price up. That's not a problem. I also understand that fancy bottles drive the price up because you have to pay for the bottle, don't you? But as a general rule, the more expensive a whiskey is, the less it's worth it to me. Because, you know, price and quality start out equal. This is price over here, my right hand, price. Price tends to go up faster than quality. And the highest quality whiskey I've ever had, in my judgment, everybody's palate is different, but the best whiskey I've ever had is a $28 bottle now, down $2 from where it was. So, if this whiskey in and of itself is worth $30.09, well and good. If it isn't worth it to me, then this will be the last Angel's Envy I buy. Now it's been sitting open for a week. The air has had time to interact with the whiskey, and we'll see whether there's been any change, any improvement, what's the opposite of improvement? Disimprovement? Degradation? Getting a very fruity note. It's a mixed fruit. I think there might be apples and grapes in there. And I need to mention that I don't know wine at all. So what I'm getting that comes from the sherry barrels and what I'm getting that comes from the bourbon itself, I can't differentiate. All I can tell you is what I'm getting. What did I say? Apples and something else, and I can't remember. There might be some bananas in there. As a general rule, bourbon is not too fruity on the nose. This is coming across almost as though it's a barley whiskey, which is generally fruity. So I think maybe that's the sherry influence. There's a freshness in there. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like a breath of fresh air. There's some bananas in there, down underneath the rest. Kind of a floral note, too. And I can't say more than that. It's a faint note, and I don't know a ton about flowers, and those two things together mean I can't tell you what flower or flowers it is. This stuff is, okay, 43.3, so that's 86.6 proof, which is not a high proof. That explains why I'm not getting much alcohol on the nose. In fact, I put my nose right down in there, and I can tell there's alcohol there, but it's coming across as very low proof, and 86.6 is low proof. I like my stuff 90 or better. I'm not getting any more notes on the nose, so I'll have a sip. That mouthfeel is watery, which I would expect from that proof. But drinking 90 and better, I've drank plenty of 100 and proof and better whiskey, and I've gotten to where that watery mouthfeel just turns me off. Now, if you like the lower proof stuff, and you can be a whiskey drinker for 25 years and still prefer 80 to 90 proof, and that's your privilege. That's your right. You drink what you like. I'll tell you what I like. If something's crap, I'll tell you. If something's wonderful, I'll tell you. I don't have any sponsors, there's no pressure on me. Besides, I have the diplomatic talent of a nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon, of course, you set it off and everything goes poof. It don't care. Almost a jello note in there. And again, I can't specify the flavor, but it makes me think of jello. And I can't help but thinking a lot of this is coming from the sherry influence. On that first sip, I wasn't looking for any specific flavors. I was just looking for mouthfeel. That's how I do it. But I do have a oak just setting on my tongue forever. This time I'll be looking for some flavor. It tastes, I'm not sure how I can say it tastes like anything. It has a generic fruitiness on the palate, and there's some oak sliding around in there. But I'm not really getting the things that to me are typical of bourbon. There was some cinnamon, but not much. On that first tasting sip, I didn't notice any brown sugar, I didn't notice any vanilla, I didn't notice any spice. And again, the low proof is going to have something to do with that. When you water down the proof, you are also watering down the flavor. The flavor comes from what they call congeners. That's compounds, chemical compounds in the whiskey besides the water and besides the alcohol, and they give it flavor. Some come from the grain itself. If you drink White Dog, as long as they don't distill it to a ridiculous proof, you will taste what the grain has given to it. Now, I like once in a while to have a bottle of Buffalo Trace White Dog. The number one mash is all that I've been able to find here. And you can taste the grain. It's a very grainy whiskey, very grain forward, as they say, which figures. It's never seen the inside of a barrel. Now, they could take that exact White Dog, put it in a barrel, drive in the bung, pull the bung, turn the barrel over, and dump it, legally that would be bourbon. But in order to be bourbon, it has to be in that new charred oak barrel. But there's no minimum time. The time it takes to fill it and dump it, never mind the bung, that qualifies it as bourbon. And it's a wonder some distillery hasn't kind of gone and funded everybody by doing that. Call it white bourbon. Nothing new coming up on the nose. Just as I swallowed, there was a burst of alcohol on my tongue, and that went down. And then there's that oak. That's all it is. It doesn't even have the chocolateness that oak often gives me. And I can't help but thinking a lot of that is just that low proof. The flavors are not there. They've watered it down to where the flavors are so diluted that you can't taste them. This would be better, I think, my judgment, if it was, say, 100 proof. It's so weak at 86.6, so weak in proof and in flavor, that I don't think just bumping it to 90 would work. I think you'd have to bump it to 100 to get any real improvement. But quite frankly, I'm just not a fan of this Angel's Envy. Now, I'll do a distiller review on the third glass. This was the second. On the third one, I'll write up a detailed review and put it on Distiller, and maybe I'll do an actual review of this. But I suspect that after I do the Distiller review, whenever that is, I'm going to just dump it. It has not opened up significantly in a week. Now, I realize sometimes you can leave a whiskey set for years and get real changes. But there should be some difference in a week if it was going to change at all. And I'm not getting any difference. So what do I mean by open up anyways? I can't remember if I have a video on that in my Whiskey Basics playlist. But it's kind of like you have a book right off the press, you brought it home from the bookstore, and then it opens up and reveals to you what's inside. When we talk about whiskey opening up, that's not a bad image to have. As whiskey, now, whiskey does not continue fermenting after distillation. The distillation kills the yeast, and all you have is the alcohol, nothing left to ferment. There might be a little sugar left, I don't know. Probably not enough for a single yeast cell to survive on. Wine keeps fermenting in the bottle. Whiskey does not. Any distilled spirit does not continue to ferment in the bottle. And it's not going to go bad. You know, the alcohol is a preservative. When Horatio Nelson died at Trafalgar, they put his body in a brandy barrel, and that preserved him until they could get him back to England for the funeral. So whiskey doesn't continue to ferment. It doesn't rot. It doesn't spoil. It doesn't turn to vinegar like wine can do. But it does, once you open it, it does interact with the air. There's evaporation. There's exchange of molecules from the air into the whiskey, from the whiskey out into the air. And that's part of why you nose it, because of that interaction with the air. The whiskey's evaporating, and those molecules go into your nose and you smell it, and you can see what's there. And there are people who have the scientific knowledge. They can tell you what chemical gives a banana note, what chemical gives this note, what chemical gives that. I'm not a scientist, nor the son of one. I'm not a scientist, nor anything like thereunto. All I'm interested in is my own experience with the whiskey and my own judgment regarding it. But, you know, you got all these chemicals. You open the bottle, there's that interaction with the air. Very often, not always, very often, it will improve the whiskey at least slightly when that interaction begins to take place. Sometimes a whiskey will get worse. Usually, in my experience, if it's good when you first open it, it's good all along. If it's bad when you first open it, it's bad all along. There are people who will talk about the neck pour, and the phenomenon does have some justification, or the term does, but it's not a universal thing by any means. And anybody who tells you categorically the neck pour is no good, he might know what he's talking about in everything else, but he doesn't understand that one particular point. And he probably hasn't even paid attention. He probably just heard somewhere neck pour is no good, and so he's just assumed that that's the truth. But whiskey does open up, and sometimes you can't detect the difference, sometimes you can. Usually when you can, it does get better. Sometimes it gets worse. I've had whiskey that with each time I drank it, it got worse and worse until I just chucked it. To be honest, I'm not sure this is, for my palate, any better than Jack Black or Beam White. It's bourbon. It has some characteristics that you won't find in any other bourbon, or at least that you won't find in standard unfinished bourbon. This is the only finished bourbon I've ever had. And quite frankly, if this is typical, then I don't want to try any others. But there are so many things you can do with bourbon, and egad, I'm already at 23 minutes. But I've already started the sentence, so you can just age it and be done with it. You can finish it by putting it in another barrel. You can go the maker's mark route and finish it by putting various staves into the barrel. You can double oak it, which means you take it out of the first barrel and put it in another charred barrel, just an ordinary charred barrel, and that enables the whiskey to work brand new in interacting with the wood. You can vary the mash bill. You can vary the proof off the still. You can vary the barrel entry proof. You can vary the aging time. You can vary the yeast. And sometimes just the mildest change, say from one yeast strain to another, can cause a ton of difference in the flavor. But this finished whiskey does not impress me. If I didn't want to write that distiller review, I'll be honest, I would go ahead and dump it now. But I want to, so I won't. And if you've been watching this new setup, video or 3, you know that when I move the bottle aside, I'm getting ready to end it. Here's mud in your eye.